So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this last of the 5 online workshops for NVivo. I'm going to acknowledge that I live, work and study on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and acknowledge their elders and pay my respects to the First Nations people of this area who've been the custodians of this land for tens of thousands of years and acknowledge their ongoing spiritual connection to the lands, waters, and skies of this region. So this course has been separated into 5 sessions. So we're looking at the last one today. We're looking at visualizations. So how can NVivo help us look at the data that we've been working on? So we're going to learn today how to create a bar chart, a hierarchy chart, 2 different kinds of diagrams, comparison and cluster diagrams. And if we still have time, we'll look at making some maps. So our broader skill today is learning how to export parts of our data from NVivo and learning how to adjust the visualizations within the program. So first up, we want to look at bar charts. So a bar chart shows the frequency of particular items in your project depending on the parameters you choose. And they have an x-axis and a y-axis. So when choosing the parameters, we're choosing what's charted on each of those axes. So let's bring up my example project. So this is the more expanded data set that I've used the last couple of weeks. And I've been working on this a little bit in between sessions. So there's hopefully a little bit more to look at because like queries, like we were looking at last week, visualizations are useful mostly when you've gotten towards the end of doing your data cleaning and your analysis. They can sometimes help in the beginning, but I find them more helpful when I've done a lot of the work of sorting and coding and analysis. So to create a bar chart, we're going to be looking in the Explore tab, which is where we've been looking for queries and text searches and word frequency searches and that kind of thing. And we're going to click on chart. So we've only got one option there. If I select a file, there's a couple more things that pop up. So we can do document coding, we can do by attribute, but we're just going to choose that top option for now. And I'm going to let's have a look at files. So these are the options that I have, files by attribute. So for one attribute or for 2 attributes, I'm just going to choose one for simplicity's sake. So as you can see, I mentioned it's got axes, this chart. So we've got an x-axis and a y-axis. So I want to choose what attribute I want. Oh, it hasn't got any file classifications. That's interesting. Let's go back and choose a different option. Let's do coding for a code. Okay, what code do I want to look at? So this is some manual coding I did yesterday, and I've also coded things into questions. So let's just have a look at a question for now, because I want to see who did the most coding into question 1? Who did the most responding to question 1? And then, so I've got some options here for my y-axis. I can choose the most coded files, which is these transcripts over here, or selected items. And I actually want to see this by case. So why is it not letting me choose that? It's not working like it was yesterday. Let's just do that for now. So there we go. We've got a bar chart there, and you can see along the bottom here, some of them are actual files. So it's showing me the file because Richard and Patricia were both interviewed in the same interview, so they're in the same transcript file. So we can't actually tell how much Richard and Patricia responded to question 1 separately because they're combined in the same file. So if I click select data, I just want to see if it will let me choose. Here we go. So now that I've created the chart for some reason, it's giving me the option to choose selected items for this x-axis along the bottom. So I want to choose their cases because I know I separated them out individually. So I'm going to go, that's codes, I want cases. So I've chosen, I need to check that box there so it chooses all of them. There we go. So these are all separated into the individual speakers. That's what I want. I've done that. And now I can choose what I want it to show me on the y-axis. So do I want it to show me the percentage of the responses that each case made, or the number of coding references or words? So you've got a few options there. I think I want to see the number of coding references. So, all right, so that's showing me something different. So we can see it's now looking at the cases. So each individual case there is now showing up across the bottom here. And if I sort this, you can see it says Barbara, Dorothy. Oh, this isn't showing things just for question 1. This is showing things for all questions. So that doesn't really matter. Forget I said that. So this is looking at the number of coding references for each of these people. So Patricia was the one and Patricia and Charles both made 4 responses to question 1. So that might be kind of interesting for us to look at. And if I click at the top here, you can see there's a new tab that's popped up called Chart. And this gives us a few options for how we want to view this information. And if I click on color scheme, you can see it's automatic colors. But if I click item colors, these are showing up in different colors because I have gone into each case here and assigned each person a color. Now, if you want to do that, you can right click and go down to color here, and you can see that Barbara is selected as dark green here. But because Barbara didn't respond to this question, there's nothing there for Barbara. If I right click on Charles, who we know said a few things, that's highlighted as red there, and that's the color that we can see there. So if you want some colors in your bar chart, you can assign those. So because this chart I've selected to show it by cases, it's showing the color of the case that I chose for each case on the left here. Now let's go back to the chart tab. What are some other options that we have to, sorry, I've got the Zoom menu that keeps popping down. I'm waiting for it to go away so I can click on this chart tab again. We've got some other options in terms of how we can view this as well. So there's a few different visualizations, a few different ways to see this data. So we can have 3D columns. Oh, it's not showing the colors, unfortunately. We can have a horizontal bar chart instead of a vertical. So we've got your vertical there, got your horizontal. And then there's another way of viewing that in a 3D bar chart. So we've got bar and column. Now, you can also add some different grid lines with these options here. We can show the data values. So when I click this box here, you can see it's added the number that it aligns with on the left here. I'll just turn that off. You can edit the labels. You can include a title or not. So if you toggle this, the title shows or disappears. You can have a legend if you would like. So you can add a legend and it will show you the colors of each case that you've got there. You can change the font, do some formatting of the font and the text here. I don't believe you can save these in NVivo, but if you want to save it as a graphic file, a picture file, you can right click. You should be able to right click. Export chart is what you want. So if we click export, you'll get a save box. So you can choose where you want to save that. You can save it onto your desktop. You can save it into whatever folder it is that you would like. So that is a bar chart. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. And the second one I would like to show you. Are there any questions about bar charts before I move on? I'll just open the chat. Okay, I'll keep going then. So a hierarchy chart is the second kind of chart I'm going to show you today. So hierarchy charts help visualize the parameters that you choose in a way that sorts your data from high to low or vice versa. The chart therefore depends on the frequency or number of items you choose as your parameters. So to create a hierarchy chart, again, we go to Explore and we choose this button, Hierarchy Chart. And we get a wizard box, which is going to ask us to choose how we want, or what parameters, what do we want to ask NVivo to show us. So it's telling us it's going to sort it by amount. So this is going to show us, because it's a hierarchy, it's going to show us the hierarchy, the amounts in terms of larger versus smaller. So I'm going to choose the amount of coding for particular codes. So we can choose codes or files or these sorts of parts of our project that are files. Externals is something we haven't really covered, but it refers to things that we can't include in NVivo, such as physical files, like a hard copy book, for example. So you make a file in NVivo that refers to the thing that you can't actually put into NVivo. So you can also query memos. You can make a chart from your memos if you wanted to. We can include sentiment if you're interested in including the sentiment, which is an auto-coding thing that NVivo does, which I haven't used much myself. Or we can look at the amount of coding or attribute values. We can look at attribute values for cases or files or externals or memos. So I want to look at codes. And I don't want to compare all codes because I've got 3 different folders of codes here. So I want to choose selected items and I want to choose particular codes. So I'm going to click this box open here and I'm going to choose, I think I'll choose questions. Well, we looked at a question in the last chart. I'll choose these high level codes that I was working on yesterday. And I want it to look at specific things. I want it to just look in the interviews. So let's see what pops up when we do that. Okay, so this is our hierarchy chart and it shows by size. So these are the codes. You can see the titles here. If I click on my manual codes here, which I made in the last few days, you can see a few different, I guess these are themes. And some of these themes have codes underneath. And you can see I haven't aggregated them because it says intimacies has 0, but that's just because the 0 actually coded to this theme. And all of these are underneath. So if I aggregate that, just doing a bit of work. So there's actually 34 things in there. I'm going to aggregate this one as well. All right, so there's actually quite a bit in there. And I want to collapse all of these, collapse all. There we go. So we can see here that this code tensions between people and place was the largest. It's got 102 references, and that lines up with our hierarchy chart because this is the biggest box. And if I click the little plus sign, it says development negativity is the highest coded reference, which is the biggest box here. So this is a way to visualize, to eyeball your data and your analysis in terms of how much comparing to from larger to smaller, really. So it's a way of seeing your coding or your cases or your attributes in terms of big versus small. And we also, if I click into the chart, oh, I didn't mean to do that. We've got this tab hierarchy chart, and we could do some different, we can choose how we would like it to be represented color-wise. We can choose how we want the hierarchy to be, what numbers in terms of the parameters do we want it to be looking at. So items coded, number of items coded, number of coding references. And it can see it's shifted slightly depending on what we're asking it to represent. So the number of coding references, which is this number here, is what this button refers to. But if I choose items coded, that's referring to how many bits of my project were coded. So it changes slightly, which is this number here, files. And then we have some other ways we can represent that visually. So we could choose this sunburst style, and then we can choose the number of levels we want. So that's removing these child codes, putting them back in. So that is a hierarchy chart. Are there any questions about that at this point?
I've got one question, Hannah.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, is there a limit to the number of items or references that the hierarchy chart will allow you to represent? Because I've got a survey which had over 2,000 responses,
Oh,
and
wow.
there's only two. It's a quantitative survey, but two items are qualitative, and
Mm-hmm.
so I might potentially have 2,000 free text responses that I'm going to want to qualitatively assess.
Mm.
So, is there a limit to NVivo in this particular hierarchy chart element, or in NVivo in general, the amount of items which you can put in? Because here we've got, 20 or so
Yeah.
interviewees.
Yeah.
Is there a limit then?
Um, my honest answer is I don't know. But in my experience, I had a mixed method study for my PhD, which had a survey and interviews. And I found that because my coding hierarchy just got really out of control, the problem that I had was not having, it wasn't with the number of responses, it was with the ability of NVivo to analyze the amount of data I was asking it to analyze. And sometimes it would freeze and I would just have to quit out of it and come back in and try something else. So my advice would be just to try it, because it seems like every laptop, every computer is different. Uh, I hope that it would be able to manage that. It might like take some work. Some of my queries took 15 or 20 minutes to do because it was working so hard. But yeah, it might just be a bit of trial and error. I'm afraid. I I don't know if there's like actual number-based limits to the amount of data that NVivo will handle. Sorry, I couldn't be um, more help on that one, Mark. I'd
No
love to hear how you
problems.
go with that.
I'll try it out.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully this will be useful for you. Are there any other questions about hierarchy charts? If not, I'll keep going. I just want to mention as well, you still have this select data button on the top left here, where you can make some adjustments as to how your chart looks. So you can choose different areas of your project to include, different items you'd like to look at in your diagram. And again, you can't save these into NVivo, but you can export these as a picture file. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your hierarchy charts. Okay, move on to back to the slides. So the next one I want to show you is a couple of diagrams. So these are cluster diagrams and comparison diagrams. So a cluster diagram shows coding similarity to identify which of your, it might not be interviewees, it might be bits of your data were coded in the most similar way. And we can also create a comparison diagram, which might show a comparison between between two parts of your project. So let's have a look at those. And again, we're going to our Explore tab and we're going to look at diagrams. So let's have a look at a comparison. So we've got three options here. Some of them are grayed out. But I want to compare, let's compare two files. So it's going to pop up with the files that we can work with. So these are the files that we have in our project. And I want to compare, let's do Charles and Dorothy. Okay, so we haven't got any connections between those two files at the moment. Oh, I've got to wait for this to go away. Not really showing anything. Not sure why. Maybe there's no connection between Charles and Dorothy. So let's try something else. Let's compare codes. Look at my manual coding. I'm going to choose the influence of regulation as one part of my inquiry, and I'm going to choose a question. I'm going to choose vision for the future. Question 5 that people ask. So let's see if there's any. Okay, so we do have some connections here. So we can see the two things that I chose to compare in my project are question 5. So we can just zoom in a little bit with this slider here. See question 5 there, and we can see the code that I chose there, which was the influence of regulation. So we can see these arrows here to interview files. So these top ones, this icon is file, and then we've got cases as well. So it's showing the connections between the files and the cases. But over here, we've got Mary and James's transcript and James, the case for James. And these don't have any connection to this code. They're only connected to this question. So that's why they're not in this middle section here. So this might be useful for you if you want to compare, if you want to see which parts of your project are connected, but it only lets you select two things to compare. So we're comparing question 5 here with this code. We can try a different one again. Can compare cases. So let's pick two cases to compare. Let's pick Daniel and Susan. Right, so some connections in the middle there. So we've got all these codes in the middle, and we've got some auto coding that connects them and some sentiment at the top. These icons are for sentiment. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. So, oh, let's just close that window. But I hope that this kind of explains a bit of how you can use comparison diagrams to compare files, codes, or cases within your project to see where they're connected and what isn't connected to those two parts of your project. No, it's a good question, Joe. It's not showing differences in responses. It's just showing connections between two parts of your project. So here I've selected what I've coded to question five, so how people responded to question five, and what I've coded to the influence of regulation. It's not telling me anything about what's within those codes. It's just telling me which parts of my project are connected to those two other parts. So what's connecting these two is these interview files and these cases. So those cases and files are connected to both of these coded parts of my project, but this interview file and this case are not connected to this code. They're only connected to this code. Does that make sense? Yeah, great. Thank you. Um, they're a bit overwhelming to look at. And I didn't really use them a whole lot in my project. Yeah, it is kind of like a Venn diagram, Katrina. Um, that's a good way to describe it. It just is a bit more complex to look at, I suppose, because they've had to find a way to show you the different parts of your project that are connected um, in that overlapping section. So yeah, this would be part of the left part of a circle, and these parts would be what would be the overlapping parts of the circles in the Venn diagram. So that is a comparison diagram. Let's have a look at a cluster diagram. So cluster analyses, they help you generate a diagram that clusters selected files, externals, and memos together if they are similar on selected characteristics. So these can be viewed as a dendrogram, which you'll see in a second, or a cluster map. So I want to see, what do I want to see? Let's have a look at, let's just see what happens if we choose um, our interview files. And what do I want to cluster it by? Word similarity, coding similarity, or attribute value similarity? I'm going to choose coding. I want to see how similar my interview files were by how they were coded. And you've got some options here which are far more statistical than I have the ability to explain. I don't understand what these do and how they're different. Perhaps you do. If this matters to you, how these are calculated statistically, then I encourage you to look those up. Um, I didn't ever look into it because I didn't really use this cluster analysis. Um, but you can choose from these three different similarity metrics. But let's see how it shows the similarities. So this is a dendrogram. And it shows our interview files because that's what we chose as the data that we wanted to look at. And it's showing which of our interview transcripts were similar based on the coding. So it tells you at the top, that's your title there, items clustered by coding similarity. So Susan, Thomas, and William had similar coding in their interviews. And so did this group down here. And this is getting further and further away from similarity as we go down. So it looks like there's two main branches of coding similarity. If I click on summary here, we get a bit more of an explanation. If I do that descending, it shows us what is the most similar. So Maria and Daniel's interview was coded most similarly to Charles's on Jacquard's coefficient. So we can see the data behind the diagram by clicking on summary there. And back to our diagram. Again, there's a few different ways to view this information. So we can see this 3D cluster map. We can kind of manipulate that a little bit and see that in 3D space. That's your dendrogram. This is a cluster sort of view. We can use our slider to zoom out. So the ones closer to the middle were more similar and the ones on the outside were less similar. We've got this vertical dendrogram, and we've got this, which it doesn't seem to have drawn any lines in between. So perhaps it was too complex. I'm not sure why that one's not showing anything. Circle graph. Let's go back to our horizontal dendrogram. Again, we can choose, we can go back and alter this if we wanted to choose. If we chose word similarity, we can see how our dendrogram changes. Showing those double, I'm not sure why that is. Looks like it's got our files twice. Yeah, so we've got files in the files folder and in the interviews folder. So that's really interesting because that tells me that I need to probably delete these files out of just this overarching files folder because these are the ones that I've coded. So what happens if I do that right now? It's closed all of my diagrams because I deleted the data that it was looking at. So let's see. Let's do that again. Let's have a look. Clustering on word similarity. Let's choose my files again. Okay, so that looks slightly different now. It's a bit smaller. So Mary and James's interview was the most similar to Maria and Daniel's in terms of word similarity. But if I wanted to change that to look at coding similarity, I can choose this select data button and see how that changes. So looks like Barbara and Dorothy were fairly similar to Margaret, perhaps. What about if I look at it as a cluster? So Charles, Richard, and Patricia's interview was kind of similar to Charles's. Can the similarity graph show the similarity within an interview between different interviewees? I would say no. I would say that's where cases come in. So if you wanted to compare different cases, you would need to choose show similarity by cases. So let me see if I can. Oh, it's only letting me look at files in this cluster analysis. So you'd need to choose a different kind of visualization to compare cases. So maybe we would choose a comparison. So if we wanted to compare cases, we could do that in the comparison diagram, where we could choose two different cases to compare. And it will show you where those two cases cross over. What are they both coded into? What's unique to that person, which is not in the middle section? Any other questions about the cluster diagrams or comparison diagrams? So the last thing that I want to show you are some maps, and these are kind of a bit kind of sandboxy in that you can manipulate them. A lot of maps, a lot of the tool, um, I guess the options for using maps are really interactive. So there's mind maps, concept maps, or project maps. And these live down here in our visualization section. So if I go back to Explore, we've got a button that says Maps. So you can see the three different kinds of maps that we can start to use here. So if I click Project Map, the name, and we've kind of got this empty box. I might just close this here. And we can click and drag items into our map here, or you can do the same from here. So let's add are cases. So when we add different parts of our project, it shows us how they're connected. So I've just dragged in this theme here, the tensions between people and nature, and it's showing me which cases are connected to that code. And we can move these around, and it's showing us that they're connected by codes. Barbara doesn't seem to be connected to this code, so nothing Barbara said has been coded into this code. So we can turn that into a kind of a spoke diagram if we wanted to. We could let's click on to show associated items. So it shows us what is associated with the items that we've got here. We could add so we could add positive sentiment. So again, it shows us which of those ones are also coded to these cases. We can get rid of that if we want to. So you can see it's kind of sandboxy. It's kind of like a click and drag kind of play around to see what is happening with the different bits of your project. It's quite interactive. And you can toggle bits and pieces off here. We could turn off the connector labels if we want. We can turn off different bits. If I turn off the cases, these are all cases, so it's removed the case coding. So yeah, you can kind of build a visual representation of your project. So that is a project map. Let's have a look at a mind map. So this gives you an original, like a starting point, and it's got a flashing cursor there. So we need to give this mind map a name. And mind maps are similar to the mind maps you might make if you're just using like a whiteboard and drawing ideas, or if you're using sticky notes and like sticking them on a piece of paper or a wall or something. So you can start with a central point, and then you've got these options up here to add different parts of your project. So we can add a sibling idea, so it kind of pops out to the side. So if you're thinking through a part of your project and you want to use a mind map, you can actually create one within NVivo. We can also create a child idea, which is a child of this sibling idea. And that comes off to the side, or you can create a floating idea that's disconnected. It's not connected to any part of your project. And I can double click in there. We can create parts of your mind map as codes or cases. And you can turn off editing, so you can stop editing. But we can move these bits around. You can change the look. So this is a kind of, yeah, I guess kind of like a thinking through sort of thing. If you wanted to use some bits of your project to create a mind map that will show you that you can, you're doing the work yourself basically. So it's not like a visualization or a query. It's you thinking through your project within the NVivo software. And then the last kind of map I want to show, if I can get this, I just have to wait for the Zoom. We'll just click hide those meeting controls. Go back to explore and we'll do a concept map. And we've got this option here, all of these options here, some icons that we can create from scratch a diagram. So we can add a note, we can type something in our note, we can add these different shapes. And they can represent whatever you want. We could add a project item. We could add. Okay, so go on. Add all of those. Let's go. We can add a code as part of our diagram, and then we can connect these if we wanted to. So we can click and drag to other parts of our project. You can change the look of these connectors. So at the moment, this has got an arrow pointing from one to the other. If I click on that and click change connector, if I click symmetrical, it's got arrows at both ends. Associative, where they're just linked and there's no arrows. Or one way, where there's an arrow just pointing one way. There's my shapes box gone. So yeah, it's kind of just a thinking sort of area where you can visualize your project yourself if you want to in any particular way. So I'll give you a few minutes to have a go at creating any one of the things that we've looked at today and see how you go with that. See if you have any questions when you're trying to manipulate or alter any parts of those, and have a go at creating one of these maps. Go back to pointer, I can move these around and have a think about how these might be useful to think through or visualize parts of your project. No worries. Thanks, Katrina. Just putting my email in the chat again. Um, for anyone who might have questions down the track. How are you finding the visualizations and the maps? Do you think they'll be useful for you? Yes, there are a lot of visualizations. Um, I actually ended up just exporting my data to uh, Excel. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Because the things I wanted to visualize, I just couldn't figure out how to do it here. And it was just basic stuff like, oh, good. I'm glad that the mind maps might be useful for you, Nicole. Yeah, I had to do a lot of work with the um, classification sheets and getting those right, getting those to be able to disaggregate by gender across both my survey data and my interview data. So you can see I've got the spinning wheel of death because I've asked NVivo to do something that it might be a bit too difficult to do. See if I close all of these and free up a bit of memory, I'll see if it will be able to do what I was asking it to do. Oh, I've selected too many items. Okay. So that was kind of interesting because I included the questions, so it's showing me what is grouped in terms of the questions and the codes at the same time. I find that this is a lot of working with NVivo is just clicking around and trial and error and what happens if I do this and what about if I do this and why isn't this working? So I hope that you feel confident in being able to do that. But I'll just wrap up because I've gotten through all the content of the workshop. So today we've learned about visualizations. We've learned about creating bar charts, hierarchy charts, cluster and comparison diagrams, and maps. Okay, so we've got a question in the chat. If you do not export your tables and they're not saved in NVivo, do you just need to create them again? Pretty much, yeah. Do you mean your charts?
Yes, I meant charts.
Yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't save them for you, unfortunately. So you would just have to yeah, if you don't save it and you accidentally quit out, you would need to just go back in and create it again. The only visualizations it will save are your maps. For some reason, I don't know why. But uh yeah, thank you so much for attending the course if you came to all 5 workshops. That's pretty much it from me. So I'm going to hang around if anyone has any questions, but otherwise, thank you so much for attending. I